Dr. Mindy Pelz reveals the top mistakes people make during intermittent fasting that can lead to weight gain instead of weight loss. Find out what you should avoid to maximize your fasting results and truly support your body's fat-burning processes. Before you start, make sure you're already subscribed. By subscribing, you'll gain access to the most valuable health tips and effective strategies to maximize your intermittent fasting results, straight from Dr. Mindy Pelz.
Fasting is very popular right now. What are the top fasting mistakes that people make that actually leads them to lose the benefits of fasting and actually potentially even gain weight?
Yeah, it's really interesting because it's not what you would think it is.
Yeah.
It's fasting the same way all the time. So I learned this is the biggest mistake, and I learned this from my YouTube channel because when Jason Fung's book, The Obesity Code, came out, everybody started to realize, like, oh, wait, calorie in, calorie out, that's not where weight loss is at. We need to think about weight loss from a hormonal standpoint. And he taught the world really how to use fasting to change the hormone of insulin. And so everybody started doing what I call them O-matters. They all started doing one meal a day.
Yeah.
They got amazing results. And at the same time that explosion was happening, on my YouTube channel, I was teaching something called feast famine cycling, where you kind of go back into mimicking what our primal ancestors did, which is have a feast and then go through these famine periods. And people were losing weight with feast famine cycling and not getting stuck. And all the O-matters came on, they like built my channel. Like all those people came onto my channel and they're like, I'm stuck. I lost weight, but now I'm actually gaining weight. My hair is falling out. And it was crazy. We have to vary fasting, which is really difficult for people to understand.
Totally, yeah. And I think this blends in quite nicely with what you refer to often as this sort of evolutionary lens as to how fasting has been part of our makeup and part of our genetic code. How should people think about fasting? So we know just from what you said, it can't be a one-size-fits-all O-matter once a day thing. It has to be varied. So how do people conceptualize that through that evolutionary lens? What had we had to endure that has led to fasting being something that is beneficial for us?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. I constantly in my brain go back to what did our primal ancestors do? Because we are in an evolutionary mismatch, both men and women, especially women with hormones. But the modern world is making us sicker and sicker and sicker. And so if we go back to what they did when it came to food, they came out of the cave. There was no refrigerator. There was no pantry. You couldn't have, DoorDash deliver it to the cave. None of that existed. So they had to every day go and find food to be able to survive. Sometimes they would find food very quickly. Sometimes it would take them days to find food. So what's really interesting about fasting is we had to rely on an alternative fuel source, kind of like a hybrid car. We had to go into this fat-burning ketogenic energy system in order to make ketones to power up our brain and give us energy, and it kills hunger, so that we could go find food. And then we would find food, we would bring it back, and we would feast. And sometimes that feast, like if there was a big kill, would last a couple of days, and then they'd go do it again. So that's how we are built to be. What's really interesting is that when I was putting Fast Like a Girl together, I found a hypothesis that is really fascinating.
Yeah.
It's called the thrifty gene hypothesis.
Okay.
Have you heard of it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've actually talked to some genetic specialists, like, can we actually measure this gene? And the idea is that the humans that evolved out of that moment in time had this genetic profile that allowed them to go without food. The ones that didn't have that genetic profile died. And so that gene didn't continue on in the generations. So their belief is that we actually all have that gene in us now. And when we're eating all day long, we're actually now going against our genetic profile.
Yeah.
And they're believing that maybe it's this thrifty gene that is contributing or accelerating the prevalence of diabetes and poor metabolic health.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing, I guess, from you is considering we are taught at a very young age, breakfast, lunch, dinner.
Yeah.
These are the 3 meals that you have every single day. You're meant to eat at certain times. There appears to be this evolutionary mismatch between, how we act today and actually how our bodies are designed to thrive in the world. And putting that all together, how should we be thinking about when we put food in, and particularly, obviously, Fast Like a Girl?
Yeah.
Why is it different for women?
Yeah. So the first part of that question is we have to start to look at our 24-hour cycle as we have a window in which we eat and we have a window in which we don't eat. This eat 6 meals a day, it'll speed up your metabolism. There's no evidence that makes sense anywhere.
Where did it even come from? Because I remember getting a lot of this information, particularly like 10, 15 years ago. It seemed quite fashionable to eat little and often, graze all day.
Yeah.
And if you think about it just from the perspective of your microbiome, that needs your gut, that needs a rest.
Right.
It doesn't seem like it has any place.
Doesn't seem logical.
No, not at all.
I thought about this recently, that I think what happens is if you're measuring our metabolism, the metabolism will speed up when you eat a meal to match what it needs to do to break that meal down. But that doesn't mean that you're going to lose weight, because all your body did is raise its temperature and start to rev up its metabolic system to match the meal so it can process the meal. So that's the only thing I can think, is that people were like, oh, the metabolism speeds up, but it's not like it speeds up so much that it's going to go after fat or go after weight loss. It just is matching what it needs to do to handle that meal. The other interesting one, and this one just kills me, is that the breakfast is the most important meal of the day.
Yeah.
So in the 70s, there was a breakfast cereal company that was putting out a new line of breakfast cereals, and they had to come up with a slogan. And they came up with breakfast is the most important meal of the day.
So that came from an advert?
Came from an advert.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it sticks. Here we are in 2023, and it still sticks.
Yeah. It's
totally crazy.
It's amazing that, because there's parallels within jewelry. So, this whole sort of, I'm saying this because I recently got married about a year ago now, and I got engaged a year before that. And I remember chatting to some of my friends about, how much I should be spending on an engagement ring. And what I was told from multiple different sources is 3 months' wages. That's how much you should be thinking,
wow.
Which is a lot, right?
That's a lot.
Where that came from was apparently a De Beers advert decades ago. So
Right.
these kind of these advertising slogans, these advertising myths that are so old, still ring true today in this age of information overload. So it's interesting to see how these advertising slogans can have that drastic an impact.
Isn't that crazy?
Right now.
Yeah, and on the metabolic one, it's the most logical place my brain can go to is if eating 6 meals a day made you lose weight, then why do we have a metabolic mess in the world? Why is obesity on the rise? Because that isn't working. If all the dieting we've learned up until this point worked, you and I wouldn't be sitting here having this discussion. My book would have never even come out because everything would have been working, and people would be able to lose weight based off of calorie in, calorie out, eating 6 meals a day. Maybe I'll just move my body a little more. The things that we've been taught about food and what it does for weight loss and weight gain, 90% of them are wrong.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
So I think we have to question where these thoughts get in our head. So that would be the first thing I'd say. The women versus men. This one is really interesting, and I keep unpacking more and more and more because hormones fascinate me. But if you look at the human body, the number one desire of the human body is to stay alive. It will do everything it needs to do to stay alive. Like, one thing I've been saying about weight loss recently is if your stress is really high, I could give you all the fancy fasting tips, but your body isn't making weight loss a priority because it thinks it's being chased by a tiger. So it's got to get away from the tiger, and then it'll come back and drop weight, have you drop weight. The other thing that I always think about with weight loss is that all fat is your body tried to store something, and it didn't know what to do with extra something, extra hormones, toxins, glucose, And so thank God it put it around your belly and not around your heart.
Yeah.
So there's so much mismatch there. But with men and women, survival's number one. And then for women, the second priority is reproduction.
Yeah.
So when we come to weight loss for a man, we just have to make sure that he's like not stressed out.
Right.
And follow some of the principles, like just compress your eating window, leave a little longer timer for fast, and you will drop weight like this.
Okay.
For a woman, we have to go, okay, how do we fast according to the reproductive cycle? And it doesn't matter if you're 25 or a postmenopausal woman, what do we need to do to be able to make your reproductive hormones happy?
Yeah.
And that is a complicated answer because estrogen and progesterone, estrogen comes in the front half of a woman's cycle, progesterone comes in the back half. They have massively different food requirements. Estrogen loves when you fast. So keep glucose down, do a lot of fasts, and estrogen is going to thrive. Progesterone's completely the opposite. In fact, you have to keep glucose up. And you know how we know this? Any woman you ask will tell you, I am so hungry the week before my period, and all I want is carbs.
Yeah.
And for years we've been villainizing this. But our smart bodies were like, bring glucose up so we can make this key hormone so we can shed the uterine lining. And once I identified that, I was like, oh, okay. So fasting has to be timed to these two hormones, which is why we can go into a longer fast in the beginning of our cycle. And then as we get closer to that week before our period, we need to stop fasting.
Have you ever made any mistakes during intermittent fasting? Do you have any questions about what might be hindering your results? Comment below and don't forget to like and subscribe for more valid tips.